Snow fell like slow-burning ash from a sky heavy with sorrow. The land stretched white and endless, every fence post and tree swallowed by the storm. A lone rider moved through it, head bowed, hat rimmed in frost, his horse staggering under the weight of exhaustion and grief. His name was James Callan, though no one in that valley knew him yet. He carried no light, no luggage, just a silence so deep it felt like prayer. When the last hint of daylight drowned behind the hills, he saw a flicker, smoke rising weakly from a chimney ahead. A cabin. One window glowed with lamplight, small and trembling against the dark. He urged his horse forward, boots crunching in the snow, his breath turning to fog. He hesitated before the door. His knuckles touched the wood once, twice. The door opened a crack. A woman stood there, holding a lantern that painted her in honey and shadow. Her hair was pale as frost, her eyes quiet but cautious, as if the world had already taken too much from her. She was young, maybe 22, but her silence had the stillness of someone twice her age. James lowered his head, voice roughened by cold and something deeper. "I lost my wife today," he whispered. "Could you give me shelter for one night?" The words drifted out like a confession. She didn't answer at first. The snow hissed against the roof. Then, slowly, she stepped aside. "You can come in." Inside, warmth breathed through the room, a small fire, a kettle whispering on the stove, a quilt folded neatly by the chair. The cabin was poor but clean, built by steady hands. He stood near the hearth, removing his hat, water dripping from the brim. She set the lantern down and moved with quiet care, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace between them. He didn't look up until she placed a tin cup of warm water in his hands. "Thank you," he said softly. His voice caught on the edge of the word, as though it had been too long since he'd spoken kindness aloud. She nodded, studying him, the hollow eyes, the trembling hands, the way his shoulders carried both cold and guilt. "The storm's not easing tonight," she murmured. "You can stay till morning." He sat down by the fire, the chair creaking under his weight. The light revealed a man still young but worn, the kind of face that had known both tenderness and regret. She watched him, then returned to her chair by the window. Outside, snow pressed against the glass like a desperate hand. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sounds were the popping fire and the soft hiss of wind through the cracks. Then James exhaled, as if emptying something heavy. "She was sick," he said. "I left to fetch medicine from the next town. But the river froze fast this morning. I came back too late." The woman's hands stilled. Grief, she knew, had a sound, and this was it. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He nodded. She was 25. Kindest soul God ever made. I can't even remember the color of her last smile. Her eyes softened, and in that moment she recognized a kind of mirror, the same emptiness that had lived inside her since the night her own husband never came back from the river 2 winters ago. The world had a way of burying love in snow and silence. "You should eat something," she said, standing. From a small shelf she gathered cornbread, beans, a strip of dried venison. She placed the plate before him, her hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the strange ache of remembering how to care for someone. He hesitated before taking a bite. "You live alone out here?" "Yes," she answered, sitting back down. "Name's Alma." He nodded, chewing slowly. "You keep it warm, Alma." She gave a faint smile, the kind that disappears before it can grow. "Warm's easier than peaceful." The fire cracked. Their shadows flickered against the log walls like old memories trying to climb free. He set down his plate. "People talk much in this town?" "They used to," she said. "Stopped comin' around after my husband died. Guess widows make folks uncomfortable. Guess men like me do too." Their eyes met, a long, silent understanding passing between them. Outside, the wind howled against the boards, but inside, something softened. Not warmth yet, but the start of it. Alma rose to refill the kettle, her fingers brushing his when she passed him the cup again. Neither pulled away. That simple touch, unplanned and quiet, felt louder than any word. He watched her, her movements steady and deliberate. "You didn't have to let me in," he said. "I know." Her voice was a whisper, but steady. "Sometimes, kindness is all a body's got left." They sat together after that, two souls circling the same unspoken truth. The firelight made the room golden, forgiving. James stared into the flames as though searching for something lost there. "When I was ridin' here," he murmured, "I thought I was followin' a road. But it felt more like the road was followin' me, draggin' me to where I was meant to fall." "Then maybe it brought you where you were meant to rest," Alma said, almost to herself. Outside, the storm deepened, erasing the tracks he'd left behind. Inside, the silence between them grew gentle, the kind that holds rather than wounds. When the clock struck somewhere past midnight, Alma stood, her face soft in the lamplight. "There's a blanket by the stove," she said. "You can sleep here." He nodded, rising slowly. "I'll be gone come dawn." Her gaze lingered on him. "If the storm lets you." He gave a faint, weary smile. Storms usually do. But when she turned toward her small room, she hesitated, looking back one last time. He was already lowering himself onto the floor, pulling the blanket around his shoulders. The fire painted his face in gold and sorrow. Something in her chest tightened, a fragile thread she thought had long since snapped. She whispered, almost to the wind, "The Lord sends broken men when He's tryin' to mend something." James heard her but didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the door where the storm beat like a living thing, and in that sound he thought he heard his wife's voice, soft, forgiving, fading. When sleep finally took him, it came not as rest, but as surrender. Alma stood for a long time in the doorway, watching the snow fall thick outside. The world beyond the glass was white, empty, and yet, not entirely lonely. Something had shifted, quiet and uncertain, like dawn beneath a blanket of clouds. She turned down the lantern, leaving only the fire's pulse to light the room. Its glow lingered on the man's face, then on hers, two weary hearts breathing the same fragile warmth. Outside, the wind softened, carrying the faintest sound of peace through the endless white. And though neither spoke another word, both knew that by morning, something inside them would no longer be the same. Morning came slow, wrapped in silence and snowlight. The storm had quieted, but the world outside the cabin still wore its white shroud. James stirred near the fire, half waking to the sound of a kettle's whistle and the faint creak of Alma moving about. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, then the scent of wood smoke and the sight of her brought it back. She stood near the window, her hair loose, her eyes searching the pale horizon as if expecting something to come out of it. When she noticed him awake, she turned slightly. "You should eat before you go," she said. Her voice was soft but carried that gentle firmness of someone used to surviving alone. He sat up slowly, the blanket falling from his shoulders. His chest ached with the remnants of cold. "Storms died down some," he murmured. "I can make it to town by noon." She didn't answer. He could see the hesitation in her face, some mix of worry and restraint, as though she wanted to speak but had long ago learned not to. Instead, she handed him a bowl of hot oat. "The roads'll be bad," she said finally. "Snow hides the ice underneath. Folks forget that till it's too late." He smiled faintly. "I'll be careful." But when he stepped outside a short while later, saddling his weary horse, the wind cut through him like knives. The sky hung low and gray, pressing down on the land. Alma stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching him with quiet eyes. He nodded his thanks, words too clumsy for what he felt. Then he rode off into the white. The world was silent but for the crunch of hooves. After an hour, he realized the storm had not ended at all, it had only paused. Snow began to fall again, heavy and fast. His horse stumbled on a hidden drift, and before he could steady it, the beast collapsed, its legs giving way beneath the weight of cold and exhaustion. James hit the ground hard. He rose slowly, wincing, the wind stealing his breath. The horse was alive but too weak to stand. The nearest town was still miles away. He turned toward the hills, the faint outline of Alma's cabin barely visible through the storm. His body screamed for rest, but his mind whispered only one thought: shelter. By the time Alma heard the faint thud outside her fence, evening had already begun to swallow the light. She opened the door and saw him half buried in snow, his face white as the world around him. Without hesitation, she ran into the cold, dragging him inside by his coat. He was barely conscious, his lips blue, his pulse fading under her fingertip. "Don't you leave me too," she whispered, rubbing his hands, pressing his body close to the fire. "Don't you dare." Hours passed before his breathing steadied. When his eyes finally opened, the room was dark save for the fire's dull glow. Alma sat beside him, exhaustion lining her face, a wet cloth in her hands. He blinked, dazed. "I thought I'd gone," he muttered. "You almost did," she said. "But I wouldn't let you." He gave a weak smile. "Guess I'm indebted to you again." She looked away, her voice low. "You don't owe me a thing. The Lord brings folks together for reasons we can't see yet." Outside, the wind had calmed, but another storm was rising, this one made of whispers. By morning, the news had spread through the town. A widow took in a man overnight, no kin, no preacher's word between them. The talk grew bitter, twisting mercy into rumor. That evening, the crunch of boots came from beyond the fence. Alma froze when she saw 3 figures on horseback, neighbors, faces shadowed by judgment and frost. One called out, "Alma Rain, you in there?" James rose unsteadily, still pale but standing tall. Alma met his eyes before stepping to the door. "What is it you want?" The oldest of the men spat into the snow. "Word's out you been keepin' a stranger here. Folks don't take kindly to that sort of thing. You'd best send him on his way." James stepped forward, the firelight flickering behind him. "She saved my life," he said evenly. "Twice. You think that's something shameful?" The man's eyes narrowed. "You're not from here. Don't speak on what you don't understand." "I understand gratitude," James replied. "I understand decency." She opened her door when no one else would. The second man snorted. "Ain't about decency. It's about her name. You leave now before this gets worse." Alma's hands trembled, but her voice did not. "You think I care for what they call me," she said, stepping outside. "When my husband died, not one of you came by to see if I was still breathing. Now a man nearly freezes to death on my land, and suddenly you all remember where I live?" Her words cut through the cold sharper than any blade. The men shifted uneasily, their eyes dropping to the snow. James took a step beside her. "If you've got to throw stones," he said quietly, "start with me. But don't speak her name like it's a sin." The wind rose again, carrying their voices into silence. One by one, the men turned away, their horses' hooves fading down the road. When they were gone, Alma exhaled shakily. The fire behind them crackled, warm and alive. James touched his hat, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You didn't have to stand up for me." "I wasn't just standin' up for you," she said. "I was standin' up for myself. Maybe for the first time." He looked at her, truly looked, as if seeing her not as a widow or a savior, but as a living soul. The silence that followed was soft, full, and human. Later, as the night deepened, they sat by the hearth again. The room smelled of ash and bread. Alma poured 2 cups of coffee, her hands steady now. He reached for one, their fingers brushing. This time neither pulled away. "When I knocked on your door," he said quietly, "I thought I was beggin' for a night's shelter. Turns out I was beggin' for another chance to live." Alma's eyes shone in the lamplight. "Maybe we both were." Snow began falling again, gentle this time, blanketing the scars of the day. The cabin glowed like a small ember in a field of white, the kind of light a lost traveler might follow. Outside, the land was hushed, holy. Inside, 2 souls found something that felt close to peace. And as the fire settled low, James whispered, almost to himself, Sometimes, the West gives back what it takes, just not in the shape you expect. Alma turned to him, her expression unreadable yet full of warmth. The silence stretched between them, alive with what neither dared say. Beyond the window, the snow erased every footprint, every trace of where they'd been. All that remained was the cabin's glow, a quiet promise that even in the loneliest corners of the world, grace could still find its way home.